Now, can you survive on a deserted island? There are plenty of books, TV shows, and movies about this scenario, but they all fade compared to the true story that happened to 6 young boys 50 years ago. In 1966, an Australian man called Peter Warner went to Tasmania where he kept his own fishing fleet. The son of one of the richest men in his country, his heart longed for the sea and to start his own fishing company. This passion led him to the remote island of Ata, a place he thought was uninhabited. Peter traveled around the islands of the Tonga archipelago, as he always did, when he saw something strange on the island. He took his binoculars and examined the cliff. The island was uninhabited, but he noticed burned patches on the cliffs. It was strange because it wasn't wildfire season. While thinking, Peter saw something else that made him breathless. A long-haired boy ran from the cliffside and jumped into the water. Soon other boys appeared on the cliff. When the first boy reached Peter's boat, he astonishingly introduced himself. His name was Stephen. There were 6 of them on the island, and they'd been there for 15 months. The Australian adventurer had a lot of questions, so they told their story and how they survived. It all started as boyish mischief. A group of 6 friends between 13 and 16 years old wanted to skip a day in school. They picked a time when nobody was watching them, took another man's fishing boat, and sailed away from all their problems to a day of fun. What they didn't know was that they were heading straight into a storm. The boys struggled for their lives for 8 days, alone in the middle of the ocean without a map or a compass. They had no food and no water. But on the 8th day, the boys saw land, Ata Island. When they made it to the land, they discovered the place was nothing like a paradise island. There were no coconut trees or sandy beaches. This place looked like a massive rock in the middle of nowhere. This inhospitable island wasn't very kind to the boys. Their boat crashed on the coastal stones, so the minute they got to shore, they were cut off from the rest of the world. The first days were hardest. The young boys knew they couldn't stay on the coast for long. Another storm could wash them away to the sea. So they started to search for a way up the mountain. While they were looking for a path, they built a house in a ledge beneath a rock. It became their home for another 3 months. After 100 days of unsuccessful searches, they finally found a way up. The climb took 2 days. Several times they had to stop to take a rest or turn back when the road led to an impasse. On their way up, they found old-fashioned knives left behind by people who had lived on the island years ago. Finally, they reached the top. It was nothing like the harsh nature below. In fact, the boys were happy to stay up there in the quiet and windless crest of the mountain with tons of fruit trees. They managed to make a fire by remembering how to light a flame with simple tools. Once the fire was lit, they never left it unattended, so it didn't go out for over a year. From that day on, the teenagers cooked green bananas, wild beans, birds, or any other food they could find. But what about water? Well, the kids found a solution for this problem too. One of the boys remembered how to obtain water from tree trunks. It took 4 days to dig deep enough to get it, but it worked. Next, the boys made a house of palm leaves and bushes. They moved the fire inside so the rain couldn't put it out. Rats were attracted by the warmth of their home and would sometimes attack the hovel, but the boys solved that problem too. They made thick blankets to cover them at night to protect themselves from the rats. After a while, the boys made an attempt to escape Ata Island. They built a raft, but it crashed on coastal cliffs within minutes after it sailed from the shore. That was when the boys knew there was practically no way for them to leave the island. But they didn't lose hope that someone would rescue them. As time went on, life on the island became almost a routine. The teenagers began improving their lives every day and night. The boys decided to work in pairs. They hunted, cooked meals, guarded their home, and kept fire. Their life was arranged smartly and conveniently. They planted bean vines, made new banana plantations, and used hollowed-out tree trunks to store water. They even found chickens once kept by the people that used to live on the island. So soon, they added chicken eggs to their diet. Some days were tougher than others. One night, a huge tree fell inches from their home. But the scariest situation happened during a bird-catching expedition. One of the boys climbed to the cliff top to find some eggs. He went further than they usually did, hoping to find more nests, when suddenly he slipped and fell off the cliff. His friends found him below with a broken leg. The boys helped their friend to climb back up and took care of them, setting his leg with coconut fronds and palm leaves. While the injured boy couldn't walk, other boys did his work, letting him rest and recover. After 4 months, the boys could return to duty. The scar on his leg remained, but he could walk again. After 6 months on Atta, the boys felt they'd already spent an eternity on the island. Sometimes they argued, but they knew they needed to rely on each other to survive. Whenever a quarrel happened, they just went away in the jungle and spent some time alone. After that, they usually resolved their conflict peacefully and continued to work together. When the boys got bored, they composed songs and played handmade musical instruments. They were often unhappy on the island, but their physical health was very good. They trained and did exercises every day, and sometimes they even held tennis and boxing matches. 4 seasons changed, but their daily routine was the same, day by day. Until, suddenly, they heard a cry from the lookout. "A boat's coming!" This was Peter Warner's boat. The teenagers did everything to be noticed. One of them ran down to the shore and others shouted at the top of their lungs. The boys swam to the boat as fast as they could. Their greatest fear was that people would turn back and leave them on the island. But the boat stayed, and soon all 6 boys were around the boat. Captain Warner and his crew didn't put the ladder down immediately. They were afraid of these wild boys. The castaways weren't wearing any clothing, their hair was long, and their faces were dirty. But they spoke English, so they told their story to the Australian man. He believed the boys, brought them aboard, and called Tongan authorities by radio. This was the day the boys were rescued and returned to civilization. When the boat with the survivors returned to their home island of Hahawhiva, almost all the residents were waiting along the waterfront to welcome them. The boys' relatives, who thought they would never see them again, cried from happiness, kissed and hugged their dear sons and brothers. Everybody celebrated their return. But something went wrong once the boys went home. Peter saw that the boys didn't show up for a party in their honor. He soon discovered the boys were in jail. The owner of the boat, which the boys had taken 15 months ago, decided to press charges and the boys were locked up. But Peter Warner saved the boys once again. He thought their shipwreck saga was perfect movie material and sold the film rights of the story to the Australian TV channel. He used the money to pay the fisherman for his old boat. After that, the boys were set free. Captain Warner became a national hero. He even got a message from the King of Tonga. His Royal Highness invited him for an audience. When Captain Warner came, the king thanked him for rescuing the boys and asked what he might want as a reward. Peter Warner didn't think too long. He asked the king to let him start a lobster fishing business in those waters, and the king said yes. So, Peter Warner's dream came true. He left his father's company and bought a new fishing boat. And the boys? They became members of his crew and sailed around the world with Captain Warner.